Vodkast. Welcome to the latest episode of the Vodkast. Oh my gosh, my beard is long, my hair is long, and your beard, it's getting long when you find a Blastoise at a Starbucks playing Pokemon Go and you try to tell other people about it. Like, these girls are walking by, and I'm not trying to creep them. I'm just like, hey, you guys playing Pokemon? They get their phones out. They just turned in the other direction. So it's time to get sheared. It's time for the Vodkast. And on this Vodkast, we have a super special guest. We have Sam Coren from iZotope, the guys that make Ozone, RX, DDLY, all this amazing stuff. And we talked about iZotope, what kind of company it is, where they're going, what her role is. She does demand generation. She's the head of demand generation there. And we also talk about women in the industry, why there seems to be so few of them. And we finished on how to promote yourself as an artist or a band or whatever. And since she does demand generation at iZotope, making sure that people know about iZotope's products in different categories of the entertainment industry, who better to talk to about how to promote yourself? So if you think you have a SoundCloud and a Twitter and you've subscribed to a bunch of music subreddits, you're done. You're not done. Lots to learn, and Sam is going to learn ya. We've also returned to regular programming here, meaning I'm going to be answering your questions, doing mixed reviews. People have been super patient. Thank you so much. And I'm going to answer those questions after the jump. So after the interview, I'll leave some links so you can jump around a little bit. But please, I think the whole interview is worth watching. And thanks for stopping by. If you want to write me a question, Vodkastpodcaster@gmail.com. Hit me up on Twitter. A lot of people have been doing that. Thank you so much. @JeffManch, #Vodcast. Let's get started. Hello, Sam Coren. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Vodkast. How you doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the Vodkast.
It's the pleasure's all mine. So you're not drinking anything? Is that what I'm getting?
I have water off screen, which is safe and not near any of the expensive studio equipment here at iZotope.
Okay.
It's safe, I swear.
So you're saying to me that there's no drinking at iZotope? Like, if I walked into Matt Hines' office, we wouldn't find him sipping scotch out of a bar globe?
There's some drinking, just we're very protective of the gear in the studio, and I'm all about respecting the space. Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes we have happy hour club, which is pretty chill on Fridays, get together, have a beer before you go home kind of thing.
Well, I've seen there's photos of like DJ nights and stuff like that, like wild, crazy events that go on at the end of the week, maybe?
Not so much recently with the wild, crazy events. We've had little release parties and stuff, and I did a little fun one when we released DDLY and vinyl and plug-in pack. We had a whole bunch of releases at the beginning of the year, and we just had a goofy, small little karaoke party. You can throw up the Spotify and there's a lyrics function, and we have some nice PA equipment, and yeah, that was a fun time.
That would be the ultimate karaoke experience, to do it at a place like iZotope.
Oh yeah, there's some hidden talent over here. Alex, who works in our research department, is from Russia, and he told me I really only know Disney songs and ABBA, and he's just amazing, operatic voice and delivery, and
just killing.
I got to sing an ABBA duet with my Russian coworker.
Do you remember which one it was?
I think it was SOS.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of company is iZotope? Because you guys seem to be occupying the mixing and mastering stuff, and then you have award-winning noise reduction stuff, and then you also have a lot of effects in the pipeline. So how would you describe iZotope?
Yeah. So at our heart, at the center of it all, we are an audio technology company that just happens to have a very long and successful history of releasing amazing software plugins, used on both the music production side and also used on the post-production side. And the effects universe is interesting because it spans sort of both those spheres, especially sound designers for film, TV, video games. They use almost all of our stuff on projects, so it's really cool that people get different uses out of the same product. It's a company that's been around for 15 years. It started off almost kind of like what we now think of as the typical technology startup story of a bunch of guys in their dorm room cooking up really cool stuff. And vinyl was the first plugin, and we had our 15th anniversary release of that at the beginning of this year. And just, from the people who downloaded this quirky effects plugin that just makes your audio sound, crackly and poppy like a vinyl record. People have stayed with us over the years and ended up using like Ozone and RX for mastering and restoration work. It's really common for us to, our RX post-production power users, the people who are editing sound for like Hollywood blockbusters and stuff. They usually come from musician backgrounds. So, it's really cool that iZotope has this ability to sort of stick with people over the course of their whole career in audio. And we have many things to enable them to get the sounds in their head out to the world, and it's really special to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I feel like you guys have really been pushing the effects side of things lately with the DDLY and re-releasing vinyl and even like vocal synth. Like these are things that I didn't really necessarily, in a nice way, expect from iZotope, and then like there they are.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it was sort of kind of going back to our roots a little bit. And I mean, we still have these incredibly powerful utility plugins with Ozone and RX and Alloy. But, we love fun. We love fun too. We love weird, wacky effects. And the cool thing about vocal synth is like before nobody really tried to do like a talk box kind of emulation with software. It was really, really hard to do. And that's like just another value we have. Like we're willing to tackle these really hard challenges and really bring something unique to the market. And, vocal synth is just so huge. From people who are like, oh, I want to sound like Daft Punk to people who are like, I want to sound like a monster from Doom. Like, I think almost all of our plugins are deceivingly complex and have many uses beyond.
That's one thing I said when I was reviewing either the DDLY or the vocal synth was that like the plugins you guys are putting out, they're deep but accessible, which is what you want. Like they're like you said, deceivingly complex. So you get in there, and it's like the stop motion clock on the wall. It's like 5 hours have gone by, and I haven't made a song. I've just been playing with this thing. So yeah, that's what I really like about them. I wanted to ask you what a typical day is like at iZotope and like how you fit into it, what your role is.
Yeah, so I work on the marketing team. My real title is Demand Generation Manager, which is the part of marketing that really deals with increasing our overall reach, finding new segments in the market, and trying to come up with ways to get to those people and show them how they can get use out of products from whatever lens they're looking at, whether they're on music or post, or they're really just more of a musician than an audio engineer, because our products are so broad and diverse. To really connect with people, we need to talk about the same product in a different way to a lot of people.
Exactly.
So even RX, like, a lot of people who do heavy duty dialogue work use it, but there's also like a forensic use for it too. Different government agencies or archivists will use it to clean up source material, not necessarily even for like a creative purpose, but, for a very, they're trying to restore something that has historical value, or they're trying to solve a murder mystery case with a piece of like weird cell phone recordings, or like
they're trying to figure out what Scarlett Johansson said at the end in Lost in Translation. I think RX was used to figure out what she said, what she whispered to him at the end. So, and I've also seen RX used. I've even used it myself as like a sound design tool because it has really awesome pitch shifting capabilities.
Yeah,
and you can do like telephone effects and stuff. So yeah. So you do it's demand generation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Which is really, in marketing, demand generation usually has more of a like a B to business to business kind of context. But we sell to home producers and we sell to like major news networks and everything in between. So I work with different parts of the marketing team and also the product team on really coming up with a game plan to really get in front of these people and show like all the cool stuff that we have to offer. And it's a super fun and rewarding job, especially as somebody who is a musician and really passionate about sound and making cool stuff.
Well, speaking of things that you're like kind of passionate about, I have to say that I'm very I'm a close follower of all the social media that iZotope does. Like your Twitter feed is hilarious, and it's a case study
Yeah.
in how to do social media. I think if you're an audio company, but I was following the Facebook feeds some time ago, and there was an article about women in the industry, and this is one of the things I want to talk to you about
Yeah.
because I feel like you're very passionate about this issue. And there was an article that went up, and it was discussing the deficit of women in the industry. And I just want to quote something that you said that kind of got my
Yeah.
attention, made me go, I want to talk to Sam. So I'll probably just throw a screenshot of the article and stuff in question on the screen and just read this. So you say, I cannot speak for all women, but as a female musician who has performed and recorded in multiple bands over the years, I've experienced a lot of direct and indirect sexism, which made a lot of things for me, like finding bandmates, booking shows, and recording more challenging experiences than they probably should have been. All those backhanded comments you read and hear people say over the years sure do add up to make you feel like you don't belong somewhere. And for me, until recently, that place was in the studio behind a mixing desk. So I guess this question is, as a man who's maybe unaware of some of the psychological and social challenges that women face in the industry, can you talk a little bit about them and help me sort of get what it's like from the other side, from your side?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's experiences are different. So I would just, disclaimer,
Right.
this is me speaking again. So I mean, I've been a musician pretty much since I was like 5 years old and being dragged to piano lessons, and then I learned guitar on my own, which was really empowering, especially if you're like a suburban teenager in the middle of nowhere
Right.
and no driver's license, can't go anywhere. And so music has always been this outlet of self-expression and release for me, and something really personal. And it's helped me connect with so many people. And if you're a shy introvert, getting to talk to people about their favorite bands or what they're listening to is really exciting. But when I started playing more, when I was younger, finding bandmates was really hard because, a lot of people, when they're young teenagers, like being in a band is like a really cool thing and they want to get noticed. But it's like if you're the only girl in the band, that kind of takes away from, your dude bandmates getting noticed. And so
Yeah.
finding like a band that were just like, I don't care if you're a girl, you can play, it was a little hard. And it really kind of put me off like those early experiences from high school into like being more serious as a musician. And I wish it didn't, just because, you only get to live one life. But now I'm living it, and I feel like I'm all enlightened. I want to talk more about Girls Rock Camp later, which is like a huge turning point for me.
Absolutely.
But it's a lot of little things, like, and even online, we're all so connected, and you get to hear all these different opinions. But it also, with the good comes the bad, and like, yeah, everyday misogyny is still like a real thing. I don't know if you're familiar with like the whole Gamergate
Oh yeah.
controversy. Women video game journalists just basically getting so much flack and like feeling threatened with some of the language people use. And I even was nervous about coming on here a little bit because, I like having a little bit of a low profile, but, there's all kinds of people out there on the internet.
Yeah.
So even like, and even today, like, we went into a recording session with her all-male bandmates, like the recording engineer is like, you with the band? With
Yeah.
that kind of like, you a girlfriend or whatever. And, I've gotten that a lot at like load-ins for my last band with like sound guys and stuff. And like little things like that just make you feel like you don't really belong when it's not that big of a deal for. I really don't think it, I want to get to the point as a culture where it's like you don't always have to read female fronted band
Right. Or
just
it's an
because.
all-girl group.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
like that shouldn't matter, but we still have this huge gap, and I feel like the performance gap is closing. Like at least in Boston locally, like there's just so many talented female musicians out there, and like I feel like most of the local shows I go to now, there's always women in the bands, and it's awesome to see. But when it comes to the recording world, the gap is still very much there.
It's interesting because I kind of struggled with this, something you said a minute ago, about wanting to keep a low profile and everything. And I kind of struggled with justifying bringing you on in the sense that I didn't want to make it seem like the only reason I'm bringing you on is because you're a strong woman who has an amazing job in the audio industry. And then I thought, well, how else am I going to get that perspective if I don't
Yeah.
talk to, you know what I mean? So, and I'm not, I have no illusions about my fan base. If I go on YouTube, it'll tell me it's like 98% guys, and according to YouTube, it's like 1.2% girls or something.
Yeah, and I mean I know my customer base pretty well now. I've been here for a year and it's over 90% male. What's interesting is actually on the post side, in post production, there seems to be a little bit more women, but it's still very male dominated. And I really want to, I feel like I'm in a position to kind of help, whether it's volunteering or really trying to figure out like, all right, of the women in my customer base, like what got them to buy, like, and there's like this huge upstream problem, I think. We're still, the great thing about the organization I'm involved in, Girls Rock Campaign, it is an all female run organization. And it's a really powerful thing for girls to be part of the program, like ages like 8 to 16, to have female mentors. Especially in music education, it's still a male dominated field. And it's sad because, there's all these great voices out there. We're half the world population, and like
Yeah.
we still have these issues.
It was interesting. I remember just speaking about education and music. I attended an audio engineering school, and I graduated 6 months ago, and there were very few girls. I think we had about 30 people, maybe 3 of them or 4 of them were women. And there was a moment at the very beginning of school, and I mean, I'm in Canada. It's a pretty, it's kind of like Boston's like very progressive, very liberal. And I was in class, and we had this sort of exercise where we're going around introducing ourselves on the first day, and we would say who we were, what kind of music we're working on, and we got asked to play a song that sort of that we could identify as being, that's me in a song or whatever. And it came time for my buddy, who is now one of my best friends, really progressive, amazing guy, total feminist and everything. And he was saying, my name is, this and that, and I want to play a song from my band. No problem. And he goes to put it on, and he says, and I mean this in the nicest way, he's one of the greatest guys, but he goes, and just so you know, we have a female drummer, but she plays really hard, like that. And I thought, this is coming from, if this is
Yeah.
how very clear thinking, good natured, like one of the best people I know, even if he's saying that, this kind of, he doesn't know he's being that way, you know what I mean? Then, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that something that you had to deal with, the idea that you couldn't maybe play as hard, or I'm not sure what's your instrument? Is it bass?
Mostly guitar, but
Guitar.
lately it's been a lot of bass, and I've been learning drums for the past year and a half, which has
Okay.
been super fun. Um, yeah, like My last band was a really heavy, like Black Sabbath-y influenced band, and it was always like, oh man, they're so heavy for a bunch of girls. And we had a male bassist we used to have kind of the reverse joke, like, oh, he's the token male bassist,
Yeah.
haha. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that, and even with that band, I kind of struggled with like, should I, when I write to people about, who my band is, like, should I mention that like we're a bunch of women, or do we want the music to speak for itself? I
Right.
mean, obviously they're going to hear the song and hear that it's a female vocal, and so like, yeah, that's true. It's a female fronted heavy rock band, but you never you never read male fronted
No.
anything, anything. Um, so, it's this give and take. Like, yeah, I mean, especially when you're trying to reach younger fans, because that again plays into the whole concept of mentorship. I mean, like growing up, most of my guitar idols were a bunch of white dudes from the 70s, and it took me a long time to like learn about bands like the Runaways and Lita Ford and Boris with Wada and like all these really amazing lady rock guitarists. And it's like, yeah, it might have helped, you know, me as a teenager reading like female fronted band or female guitarist. I think that's important for the younger generation. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of annoying. We still have to label that, but because we still have this inequality, um, maybe we really occasionally need to drop the fact that, hey, there's ladies in this awesome band.
It's interesting because I've attended a couple of sessions a while ago now, and I'm not the most masculine guy. Like I can't like
Yeah.
fill a sweater. You know what I mean? Like it just dangles off my wrist. It's disgusting. But I've been to a couple sessions where the atmosphere, I could only describe it as very broy, and I found
Yeah.
myself having to laugh at things I didn't think were very funny, or be interested in things that I wasn't actually interested in, just to kind of get along. And I wonder if these sort of things cross through the mind of someone like yourself or other women who are in the studio going, well, maybe I shouldn't wear that before I go to the studio, or maybe I should maybe not say this, that, or the other thing. So there's a bit of, I guess, gender theater that I think happens with men and with women.
Yeah.
The next question I wanted to ask was, a lot of people might say, well, yeah, there's tons of women in the industry, and in a way
Hmm.
they're right, but I think what that means is, kind of like you were saying earlier, the women are at the top line. They're doing talent stuff, they're singing, they're vocalists or whatever, or they're doing administrative stuff. They're not behind the mixing board. They're not in the
Yeah.
control room. Is the mixing and mastering job? I mean, is there something that isn't appealing about that, or kind of what gives?
It's I think some of it is a little bit like there's a lone wolf kind of element to it. You're in there for long hours a day, and like you're probably dealing with, that whole bro environment. Yeah, and I mean, it reminded me, I was doing some research on just mixing engineers, like who are like the cool mixing engineers out there, and I struggled finding women. And I mean, there are some out there, but it is very, very few. More technical fields in general, and even just engineering as a whole. I just bumped my own mic, sorry.
That's okay.
You can RX it out, it's all good.
There we go. There we go.
It's I think it's echoes the whole gap in STEM career representation in women. It's also part of that. Um, you know, women. I don't want to talk in stereotypes. Um, we prefer. I don't know, like it. You know, I, it's so hard to say. I mean, what put me off from recording in general, because I was always more of a performer kind of musician,
Hmm.
not necessarily like I'm a studio recording artist. Um, that whole stress about getting everything so perfect, and I think women have to deal with that in a lot of ways still.
Right, right.
Like,
No, I hear
you
you.
know, perfect hair,
Yes.
perfect everything, and like it's if that translates to your day job, it's like it's hard to take,
Your
you
head's going to
know?
explode. Well,
Yeah.
there's certain aspects, just to add to what you're saying about the mixing and mastering or just the studio rat life, that are, I think, unappealing to both genders. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you sell someone on, would you like to work 14-hour days with no sunlight, in a studio full of strangers, um, be available for requests, at the drop of a hat, to make changes to things and to deal with like, to me, I think you have to be a very specific kind of person, and it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. That's a very it's a very tricky thing to walk into and go, this is what I'm going to do for the next 30 years of my life. Like, horrible posture, horrible sleep, but I can't wait to, like, make a
Yeah.
platinum record. So, um, just before we wrap up sort of this section, there's something that kind of popped out at me. There's a podcast I listen to, and it's run by a couple of guys who offer sort of advice on mixing and all that. People ask questions, they write in, and there was a question asker who wrote in and basically said that in her workplace, which is audio related, she feels like she has to wade through a lot of gender-based discrimination, sexism, just to get the crunchy bits, the bits that are going to help her for her career. And she has to wade through a lot of that stuff to get the opportunity she wants to get. And it can be kind of exhausting. And she said, what do you guys think about this? And the main guy who kind of fronts the show responded, and I feel like I have to read his quote here, because I feel like his answer kind of typifies some of the popular thinking out there about women just having to be sort of tough and strong and ignore things. And I'm reading it to you because I heard it and I played it for my girlfriend because I saw nothing wrong with it, and she sort of like disabused me of my like ignorance, was like, no, here's why it's a problem. So anyway, let me just read it. So he responded by saying, the more women get a thicker skin with regards to men and the world, the better off they are. The more they're able to maintain control of their SHIT, the more they're able to flow with whatever life presents them. The less they worry, the more they're able to be in their own power as strong women. Words cannot knock them down. When they can get into that place, it's really quite remarkable. And that's the quote. So I'm wondering if you think this is an oversimplification of the issue. Do you think that this is one of those classic, like, you just have to change. The industry doesn't have to change.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've been following the whole Fox News sexual
Yeah, Gretchen
harassment kind of.
Wilson or
I feel like
something.
there's a lot of parallels to that. And I mean, there's harassment and discrimination in various degrees. But I feel like, that's the perfect situation of, if you don't stand up, for those things, it becomes systemic and things get really out of hand. I think, the whole just kind of bear with it and deal with it. You're not solving the problem of the whole like business as usual thing is a whole reason why we have these inequality issues. And I think the women who are out there who are doing, audio engineering work, they're at the front lines of it. And like a lot of them had to probably deal with a lot of terrible stuff said to them over the years, and they've grown a thicker skin because of that. But they're already there. Like, what about,
Right.
the little girls who are, just learning to play their instrument and they want to record and they really like recording and they want to record their friends and do that for a living. And then, maybe, they go to like a Berklee College of Music and it's not what they wanted it to be because they're constantly battling, discrimination in the workplace or school. And I'm not saying that that happens at Berklee all the time, I'm just using it as an example. Um, when I think you were saying like there are situations where you're like, I don't really think that joke that guy said was funny. But when it's directed at you specifically because you're a woman,
Hmm.
that's a problem.
Exactly.
And it takes a lot of guts to stand up and say, hey, that's wrong. I'm not cool with that. Let's keep it professional. Um,
I feel like recently Grimes had to kind of do that, or she kind of took matters into her own hands, and it kind of gets into what you said a minute ago. It might have been a little easier for her to do what I'm about to describe here because she's in the industry and she's kind of feet planted firmly in the pop world. But she just, for her latest record, Art Angels, she just decided to do everything pretty much by herself. And um, I'm wondering what you think of that approach. And you can probably sense the like kind of in my voice. Do you think that's? I mean, was that the right path? Is that a good path for some, but not for everybody? Would you insist on maybe toughing it out in collaboration, and you know what I mean? So, what do you think of her approach?
I think it's really brave, and I think, when you own your whole process from songwriting to engineering to release, you know, that's all you. That's all you putting yourself out there, and you learn a ton from that. And I think it's awesome that she was able to do that. I try to I start so many bedroom projects and I never finish them. So more power to Grimes for going all the way. Um, but some people are more collaborative when it comes to their work in general, and like they they need an assistant engineer, or they want to get a bunch of people to listen to their mix before they master it because they like that collaborative nature. I different strokes, man.
Yeah.
I think it's good for all musicians to have some level of recording and production knowledge. I think that's awesome. I'm all about learning more. Um, I don't think everybody necessarily needs to do that. But if doing everything yourself, if more women are doing that, and I think that's one way to kind of solve the engineering gap in terms of audio production. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good that there are stories like that of women just kind of rolling up their sleeves and doing it the way they want to because, you know, they're sort of fed up with the status quo. I come from a really like DIY kind of background, so um,
Well, yeah. I
you know,
just on that note about like just solutions. Basically, we've been talking about a lot of
yeah.
problems, a lot of things in the industry. So, what are some of the ways in which you're working to make sure that more women are pushing the faders?
Yeah, I mean, definitely trying to find the iZotope community and customer base, like who are the awesome women out there that we can promote, and just telling the stories. That's one thing I try to do on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of organizations at the local level that are all women run, like Women's Audio Mission out in California, who we've supported a whole bunch, and they share a lot of our education content, and that's a way that we can help bring more women into the industry and our world. So they do a lot of work and just getting more women behind the studio. The idea of an all women run organization dedicated to training audio and engineers is great. But they're just one local initiative. And then there's stuff like disc women and like beat makers that are trying to solve the problem in the EDM production world and the DJ worlds. Electronic music had a lot of flack for being really broy and misogynistic lately, but there are actually lots of amazing ladies out there making incredible electronic music, and they do different workshops on DJing and mixing and all showing women how to use the tools from other women. The organization I'm involved in the most is Girls Rock Campaign Boston, which is part of a greater girls rock alliance. They're all sort of loosely affiliated, but they're very locally organized. And we teach women and girls how to play rock instruments and be in a song and how to write songs. And there's workshops on recording and media literacy, and how to promote yourself, how to book shows, all that kind of stuff. And the neat thing about Girls Rock, it's not really about the music education. It's really more about community building and skill development than it is, just learning how to rock out. A lot of it's just, overcoming stage fright, how to work as a team. A lot of society has not encouraged women to work together. That's why you hear about like, oh, girls are catty and stuff. I'm like, no, that's just society forcing us to be super competitive with each other. But when we actually work together, good things happen. And so like, that's why I volunteer every year to work with girls and women and showing them like, yeah, playing guitar and rock music is fun, but, collaborative songwriting is just such a great way to connect with people and, like, at a very fundamental level, build these communities where women in music becomes more of a norm, whether it's on stage or booking shows or behind a mixing desk.
And I think that's great because just the bit about writing a song together and developing a friendship and stuff, because often the people, if you're trying to get into audio and stuff, the people you go to school for audio or whatever, go to this camp, like, you look around, because if you make friends there, those are the people that you're going to be working with later in the industry too. Those are the people you're going to be calling up going, I have a song, I know, like, I'm having trouble mixing it, you want to come over? And you know what I mean? And then those are the connections, and it's just sort of like micro networking on a level, because you really need people in your corner, I think, as you venture forth into this really unstable, tricky world of audio.
Yeah, I mean, I really, at a fundamental believe, like, nobody ever finds success on their own. It really takes a village. I mean, looking at Grimes, like, okay, she did everything herself, but she still needs people to book her shows and be in her band and distribute her albums and all that. Like, it's a community, and a lot of times it feels really competitive, especially when you're trying to get your band booked or get airplay or open for like a national act or get somebody to write about you. That doesn't happen for no reason. Like, you gotta be brave enough to put yourself out there and pitch yourself, but it's not always about you. There's other people. That's why, like, I always make a point, like, anytime I end up going to a show and I see like an opening band that I generally really like, I'll make a point to talk to that band, be like, hey, I'm Sam, I like your band, let's keep in touch.
Right.
Those connections are just so important, and the whole give and take is so crucial to keeping like a healthy community and industry as a whole.
Well, that's awesome. I can leave some links and stuff to all those things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. If you, as long as I just supply me with those, and I'll make sure to put them in. And
All
everything.
the links.
All the links. All the things.
All the links.
The last bit here, if you're still good for time. Oh yeah, it's okay. It's not bad. About pitching yourself, about promoting yourself. I mean, my channel, for better or worse, has become about composing, even though it's like maybe 70% of what I do. I do a lot of other stuff too, but a lot of my composer fans always ask about promoting themselves, and there's not a day that goes by I don't read on a Reddit thread or something like, how do I get my music out there? So I figured, since you do this, not that specifically, but you do a lot of demand stuff and social media stuff for a living, who better to talk to about this stuff? So I have my SoundCloud, I have my Twitter, and I contribute to as many, Reddit-related music threads. There's sub-communities, like subreddits out there. Is my job finished?
No. No. Um, so my suggestion is like always start with a good home base, and that's like your social media profiles, your web page. If you do any kind of physical distribution, used to be called like a one sheet. Um,
What's
just
that?
making so I used to be a college music director, and a one sheet was just literally a little piece of paper that people would send in with their CD or record.
Okay.
That was like a really brief band bio. Um, there used to be the term RIYL, recommended if you like, and that's where you can name drop similar artists or your inspirations. I know there's a lot of artists out there who don't want to like associate with other artists, but sounds are so difficult to describe, and I think, it's better that you tell people who you are inspired by and sound a little bit alike in the same neighborhood than other people make that up for you. Because
Yeah.
when other people make it up for you, it might be somebody that you wouldn't necessarily want to be associated with or somebody who you fundamentally disagree. Like,
And
I
then that's
think,
when the narrative starts, when
yeah,
the conversation about you changes and you don't have control of it anymore.
yeah.
And like, oh, that's the band that sounds like that, but he's like, no. Yeah.
And try to keep that consistent across, the sheet you send in, your website bio, your social profile bios. Keep it, and it can change. It's totally cool if it changes. Bands change their sound all the time. Be sure to like update your stuff. So that's one thing, try to control the the narrative as much as possible. Give people things to work with. There's a lot of lazy journalists, music bloggers out there that just copy paste, reword. And the more you give them something to refer back to, the better. Making sure that your contact information is clear. It's totally fine if you pretty much run the show yourself. It's not everybody has a booking agent or a manager. It's totally fine. Making sure like all those things have a clear way to get in touch with you, and actually checking your email for opportunities. That's like another, especially if you're in a band with multiple people and you try to democratize that,
That's
like
the worst.
somebody
Yeah.
somebody needs to be the official band communicator if you're a collaborative project. Maintaining a good press section, I think, is good, even if it's just like a quick little mention. Um, you know, that's where networking and, getting people to quickly write a nice blurb for you comes in handy. Um, you know, be familiar with your local music publications, whether they're online or they still do print, because those are the people who are going to probably write about you first.
Right.
Once in a while, some bands will get popular somewhere that isn't their hometown. A lot of metal bands in Boston, I feel like, get written up about more in Europe than they do around here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay too. It shows you that you have more of a reach behind your home base. But, maintaining a nice up-to-date press section. Another thing that can be good if you're kind of, early days starting out, kind of list places you've played before. Just kind of maintain, like, hey, we've played these kind of venues, and then it gives people who book shows an idea of like what kind of capacity you can do if you play out a lot. Take advantage of tagging. A lot of different platforms like SoundCloud and Bandcamp give you the ability to tag your music with different genres, and a lot of really nerdy curator types will actually use that to find new music. I know a few different local DJs who will just like look at the Boston tag on like Bandcamp, and that's how they keep track of like new releases from Boston bands in
Yeah,
a really
when I
easy
worked at
way.
a small indie licensing company, we did just that. Went to Bandcamp and we searched by the tags, and then we would send out emails to be like, "Are you interested in having your music played on TV
Yeah.
or something?" So that's how we'd sort everything out.
Another thing to do if you're like kind of shy about just kind of self-promoting, write fan mail to bands you like, because you will never be surprised, especially other bands that are maybe a little bit more well known than you, but not like, crazy international superstars. Although you can write fan mail to them. You know, like I said, if you really like somebody who is in an opener band, but you didn't get a chance to talk to them, send them an email. That's actually how I've booked a lot of shows for my band, just being like, hey, I really like your album. I'm in a band too. If it ever works out, like, if you like our sounds, let's do a show together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, compliments, man. Genuine compliments. And that's community building.
Sincere flattery, yeah.
And that's really, being friends with other artists gets you a lot of places. And
Yeah, I tell like
favor for him too. Yeah.
I tell people who are composing and who are like musicians or whatever, like, you're not just gonna be playing in your room with the windows open and an A&R person's gonna walk under the window and be like, "Ooh, hear that sound?" Like,
Yeah.
You don't get shows and gigs staying in. You have to go out. And
Yeah.
I think especially for composers, like, we're our own little island, and it's not like we all go to like a composer's rock show where other composers are playing. Like, it's not the way it is. So it's kind of hard for us to find the nerve to get out there with our little business cards and go to places. But you don't get shows staying in, ever.
You got to get to the gig.
You got to get to the gig.
Yeah. Get to the gig.
The last question here. I'm just wondering, I noticed that iZotope does a lot of, on the artist section of the website, or community section of the website, there's an artist section. There's like sound designers and stuff like that. If people go there, I'll link to it. I'm wondering how emerging artists can attract the attention of a big company like iZotope or another company out there. Because I know a lot of people are sort of floating around hoping like, oh my gosh, it'd be great if one of these companies could just see what I'm doing and maybe they'd be interested in whatever. So what do you kind of look for in artists or sound designers or mixing engineers or whatever? What sort of piques your interest?
I mean, a lot of people actually come to us. We have Sean, who is our wonderful head of artist relations and actually is responsible for our awesome social media presence in general. We maintain an artist@izotope.com email where people send us stuff all the time, being like, hey, I used your song on this track. And we listen to it. We click. Not every company is
you
like
genuinely
that.
listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fan mail is always good. And this past, I think maybe last month, we did like a SoundCloud playlist of just like our followers. Like, we actually looked at our SoundCloud followers and like went through their music and picked out tracks we really liked, and we did a playlist based off that. So we do look for people, but so that's why I said fan mail, man. Fan mail is important. If you like an artist or a brand, let them know.
I think that if there's any proof that iZotope is committed to actually connecting with artists and sound designers and stuff, the fact that you guys are talking to me right now is like, that's all the evidence you need. If iZotope wants to talk to me, then there's a good chance that they'll listen to your band. For anyone listening out there. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have for you, Sam.
Rad. Well, It's been good talking to you.
Yeah, let's do like an interview goodbye and then a proper goodbye after. But for the interview goodbye, thank you so much. I'm so honored that you got time in your schedule and sat down and set up the webcam and talked to me. I'm ready for my iZotope bump. I'm ready for that. I'm ready for the film.
Yeah, get the bump.
Yeah.
The bump.
Anyway, sorry.
I feel like you didn't drink as much as I thought you were going to.
No, I was captivated with what you were saying. I was like, I just didn't feel the need to reach for the alcohol.
It's very dry vodcast.
Yeah, it is. It's dry vodcast. I think after this interview, I'm going to do the other segment where I answer people's questions and do mix reviews and listen to them and give feedback. So I'll be good and sauced for that.
Nice.
Yeah. Just drinking alone. That's the life of a composer. No. Anyway, thank you so much, and take it easy.
Bye, Jeff.
And slate it. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the interview. Hope you learned a lot. We have like 5 questions here. I'm going to see if I can get through them in a timely manner because I know the interview was long. Hopefully you liked it. So the first one comes to us from Hum Music. I don't know the name, but he says, "Hey there, just want to say I really enjoyed the past 2 episodes of Vodcast." You're welcome. And he said, "I had a 2-part question. The first is, what is the best way to handle electric guitars in a mix when distorted or clean? And the second part of the question is, how do you make guitars stand out? Thank you so much. I look forward to your response." Well, Mr. Hum, Mr. Music, I should say. I actually did a little tutorial on this on my YouTube channel. I'll link to it. And it's basically just how to kind of make guitars stand out and fit into a mix. So watch that tutorial, but also I'll just explain it right here. Some of the tips and tricks. So the first part of your question is, how do we handle electric guitars in a mix when distorted or clean? The thing that I try and tell people is, if you're going to be mixing electric guitars, it really starts at the source, because a lot of people will turn up the gain on the amp if we're going distorted, and then they'll simply double track that in Pro Tools or whatever they're mixing just to get a fatter sound. And I find that what that actually does is it leads to a washier, kind of messier sound, like a more chorusy sound. And of course, when you're doubling anything, it's going to raise by like 6 dB. So you have to lower them by 6 dB. DBFS, full scale digital. So you have to be aware of that. So just by doubling it, I think that a lot of people think it's adding more meat and grit and girth. But really what it's doing is it's just kind of making a kind of fatter, kind of messier, distorted sound. It doesn't lead to more power. You want something that's going to poke through, and the way to achieve that is not through double tracking. It's by going back in the takes. Well, first of all, it's going back to the source and turning down the gain, and then adding another guitar part with the same amount of gain. And what you're going to do is you're going to sort of add more distortion, because you're adding 2 different guitar parts that have less gain, and by adding those 2 together, it's going to sort of, in a very additive way, bring gain and power. And also, you're not going to be just doubling that same guitar part. You're going to be adding that part that has a different tone because it was played differently and everything. And by adding those 2 things together, you're going to get, I think, a much more sort of authentically fat kind of sound than just by double tracking. A lot of people always double track things, and I don't think it leads to the results that they think it's going to lead to. And if you want to add even more power to that, then again, a low gain setting on the distortion, on the pedals or whatever it is, the head stack or whatever it is, add another guitar part that's just a little bit different, and also just lightly gained, and then triple track that. One thing that some people do, if they don't have additional guitar stems to work from, and they only have 1 guitar part, and you could do this, is just duplicate that part, okay? But EQ the second guitar part differently if you're going to double it. EQ it differently, make it sound a little weird, and that's going to add, I think, that gain and power that you're looking for, that you won't get if you're just double tracking the same part and lowering it by 6 dB. It's just going to sound like a louder guitar part. You want depth and grit, and I think that can be achieved if you use at the source very low, very light gain settings, and then you add those parts together, and they're going to be different because even though they're playing the same chords or the same solo, the guitarist maybe did some up or down strokes differently, or had more or less aggression when he or she was playing them. So those things are what lead to a more full sounding song, in my view, or a more full sounding guitar mix than just doubling. So and the same goes if you're using a clean guitar. Like if you're looking for power with a clean guitar, then I do the same approach. Just EQ things differently. If you're going to be doubling them, keep in mind you're going to have to lower it by 6 dB because it's going to go up if you double it. And also, if you're going for, there's all kinds of things you can do. If you're going for a clean doubled guitar sound, you could just do a little bit of gain automation on one of the doubled tracks. You could compress one of them differently, and not compress for people always compress. They always pull down the threshold and think their job is done. And I mean, you achieve something by that. You reduce the dynamic range and make it a little bit louder, but use compressors for tone more than anything. I'm saying EQ things differently. Use a compressor, but don't even throw down the threshold. Just play with the attack and release times, maybe play with the threshold a little bit, and then just turn it on. It's going to be a little bit louder, but it's going to color the sound. So think of compressors more like crayons, you know what I mean? Like a box of crayons that you use, and they're just colors, they're just tones. So I'm sure a lot of people out there have way more compressors than they need or know what to do with. So Just like an EQ, use a compressor for tone, I think, especially on a clean guitar, because clean guitars love compression. And also, if you're going to be EQing things for guitars, all the action is in the mids and upper mids, okay? So I'd say that's somewhere between maybe 600 hertz up to maybe 1K, 1.5K, maybe in that range. So if you're going to use a harmonic exciter, which a lot of people abuse and use too much, or some kind of, waves one knob thing, or a saturator, be really gentle with it, but focus all that energy in those upper mids, and that's where you're going to get your guitar action. That's where all that's where all the action is in a guitar, basically. And for your second point, how do you make guitars stand out? Well, this is done primarily through gain automation, or a little bit of compression. So when, for example, you're doing, let's say you have a solo or something, that guitar, let's say you have your rhythm guitars and whatever, have those bow out a little bit. Maybe have a little bit of gain automation when the solo comes in, so that the solo, which is, let's say, at, I don't know, minus 3 dB, if we're just using fake numbers here. If the solo is at minus 3 dB and those other guitars are at minus 3, bring them down to maybe minus 4, minus 5, so that the solo pokes out a little bit, or just do a little bit of light automation at the solo part. Another thing that people do is they'll pan things differently. So if you're working on a song that has a verse chorus setup or something like that, a lot of people, they'll just pan things. Imagine a pan potentiometer, a pan pot. What they'll do is they'll double track a guitar, which if you do it my way will sound good. They'll double track a guitar, and they will go 12 o'clock on both the pan pots. I know Logic has some funny pan pot stuff, but if you're doing stereo guitars, then you have 2 pan pots each. I think Logic, you can only go one direction or something like that. So if you're using Pro Tools, then you want to go, for the choruses anyway, you want to go nice and wide, so hard left and right. And then for the verses, you want to go put those in at 12 o'clock for the verses, so that when the chorus comes, everything sort of opens up and you get a nice big bright stereo image, and that might help your guitars pop out. I'm not really sure if you're looking to enhance a solo kind of guitar, like a finger picking guitar, or just a basic strumming backup guitar, but I think those tricks will go a long way in making sure that things poke out when and where you want them to. A lot of people really don't use enough automation, as far as I'm concerned, and if you were to pull up a mix by any pro mixing engineer, bring it into Pro Tools, the faders would be flying all over the place, going up and down and left and right, and that's because people who really mix for a living really employ automation and really use it to bring life and vitality to songs. People think that just by throwing a compressor and throwing an EQ, you're kind of done, but again, if you really sort of did like a post-mortem on one of your favorite tracks, especially a rock track, those faders are going all over the place. You're doing fader throws with reverb and delay. You're doing really fun panning tricks. You're inverting stuff. I mean, there might even be some binaural stuff going on with some really cool plugins that are out there. So there's all kinds of ways to excite and bring dynamics and vitality to your guitar parts, and automation is one of those ways. So Hum Music, I hope you learned something there. Thanks again for writing. If you have another question, please write in again. Hopefully it won't take me that much time to get back to you. Anyway, thanks a lot, Hum Music. Let's move on to the next question. This next one, this is for Lauren's Dowling Lane. Dowling Lane, yeah. If you, Lawrence, I don't know. I made a boo-boo last time, and you pointed it out in an email to me, which you sent to vodkastpodcaster@gmail.com. And you basically said that I reviewed the wrong song, so I'm really sorry that I did that. And there was no one that emailed me to be like, yeah, you played my song under someone else's name. Like, no one. So I don't know whose song I played wrong. I'm really sorry, but I'm going to get it right this time. So let's have a listen to Lawrence's mix, and then we'll do a little critique, a little review, okay? Lawrence, thank you so much for sending that track in. That was Atlas of an Artificial Mind, hopefully the right track this time. And the thing that you asked me to do, Lawrence, is talk about sort of any tips on creating space in a mix or making sounds wider, since I feel like I don't have a great grasp on the subjects. I think everyone should sort of take note, because this track is an example of, I think, when a conservative amount of reverb and delay is applied properly. A lot of times people sort of have everything 100% wet on every track, and the problem with that is, if that's what you're going for, that's cool, but sometimes things lose definition. We don't have contrast between snare and bass and guitar and bass guitar. Like, it all just gets lost in the same kind of amount of reverb. And I think that what Lawrence has done here is shown that, like, a conservative amount of those things can lead to, I think, a very kind of washy but at the same time sinewy kind of mix. As far as the song goes, like, the arrangement is very simple. It reminds me a lot of sort of ambient stuff from Aphex Twin, who I think is a total genius. And if you haven't heard Aphex's stuff, you should really check it out. But no, I really don't have much to say about this track that's negative. It's very, very calm, sort of plodding track, sort of like a 2 a.m. kind of track. I liked it. And the only thing I maybe would say is try to get more creative with your automation. So consider maybe doing some fader throws of your reverb and delay at certain points, just to sort of give the brain something to stimulate it. So, like, if you listen to a lot of dub music, like King Tubby and that sort of stuff, you're hearing a lot of fader throws. They'll basically make things 100% wet, and then they'll just send stuff to those effects really quickly and leave the fader up and then turn it down. You can go on YouTube and you can actually watch some of these amazing dub guys do what they're doing on a proper mixing console. It never hurts to sort of automate reverb and delay and stuff. Not go 100% wet and then 100% dry again, but just sort of find a space in between. Let's say when the chorus opens up, just throw things a little bit and then calm them down and bring them back. It might seem to you like kind of a fruitless exercise because you're not really hearing that much of a difference, but I think on the listener's end, they're hearing a difference because they're hearing things sort of expand and contract. And you've already got that going on here in this mix, so great job. Okay, next up, we have a mix from Andrew B. the Kid. Andrewb the Kid, maybe? Anyway, he writes to me and he says, hello. I've been watching your stuff for a while, and I really like how you go in depth about plugins and reviewing them. Anyway, I have a song. Thank you, by the way. I have a song that I've been working on for the past couple of months. It's nearly done, but the mix down is giving me some trouble. I think I have the low mids sorted out for the most part, but the highs sound shrill. I can't turn the song up as loud as I can with commercially released tracks from the big name artists when I look up to. What frequency range is causing this sort of high-end harshness, and how do I fix it? General mixing criticism is also appreciated. And he says, P.S. I'll be releasing the song in the future with a distributor, so YouTube's ID system might kind of mess with me. So anyway, the track that Andrew sent in, or Andrewb sent in, I'm just joking, is Underwater. So let's have a little listen to that. Okay, thank you so much for sending that mix in. That's Underwater by Andrewb the Kid. It's Andrew. I'm sure it's Andrew. I'll just start this off by saying that this song and this genre of music is something that I never listen to, ever. I'm not trying to be mean. I just want you to know where I'm coming from and want to be 100% honest with you. This kind of, I think it's like glitch hop or something. It just never enters my rotation. So that doesn't mean that I don't have anything to say about it or that I can't say anything about it. I think I have a lot to say about it. But just know that my comments are coming from a place of that ain't my genre. But let's get into it. A song is a song. So the first thing you say is the mix down is giving you some trouble. You have the low mid sorted out, but the highs sound shrill. I don't know what you're using. It could be you're doing some exciter stuff in Ozone. It could be that you are using some clariphonic stuff from Kush and you're pushing those highs a little high. When I put them on the EQ, grid, I didn't really see anything jump out. I didn't see anything problematic. So I don't know what's happening there. I mean, you could just go in with your EQ and just put a low shelf on there if you think they're a little bit too loud. Or what you could do is bring those mids up a little more, and then that way the mids will be a little bit louder than the highs, and that might solve some of your problems. I think you do have the lows sorted out. It could be the listening system, the playback system that you have might be over-representing your highs a little bit. So I don't know what you're listening to mix-wise, or I don't know if you're just using headphones. The headphones might be causing trouble for you. You might be in a room where there are frequencies in your space that are kind of doubled. They're bouncing back and forth, and they're sort of amplified and accentuated. So maybe that's giving you the impression that the highs are a little shrill. But I do have some things to say about this mix. Before I do, let's get back to the other things you asked me to look at. So you said you also can't turn the song up as loud as some of the songs you like, commercially released songs. And then general mix and criticism. So let's address the loudness thing. So first of all, I really want people to kind of forget about making their songs loud. And if you watched an earlier vodcast, I think I lost a couple subscribers for telling them that the mixes were too loud, because they were, according to me, okay? But that's just my opinion. So bottom line is, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube are all employing loudness normalization technology, meaning that if you're uploading a mix and it's not as loud as the mix that you like on the radio, like One Dance by Drake, it doesn't really matter, because if you have volume check enabled in your iTunes, which is the largest media playback format there is now, your song will be brought up as loud as that one. So, and if you're worried about my track is going to play on the radio and I'm not really sure if it's going to be loud enough or whatever, radios use all kinds of technology that basically compress and limit the signal, just no matter what you sent it in as. So if you send it in at with minus 1 dB of headroom, by the time it makes it past the processing in a radio tower, for example, there's a thing called an optimod in broadcast stations, where this is just something that's used to increase the signal and maintain signal integrity in places that might have crappy sort of service. That thing's going to be limiting and compressing the song and bringing it up, boom, with that level. And I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't loudness normalization technology out there already in a radio station, where they just sort of automatically bring things up to a level that's sort of pleasing for FM and AM tuners. So I really want people, and Andrew too, to sort of forget about trying to make things as loud as possible. The reason a commercially released track is as loud as it is and you can't get it up there is because that mastering engineer just has a lot of experience and a lot of really great gear, and knows how to take a mix that was maybe mixed by another person who has a lot of experience under their belt, and bring it up to a level that just about distorts but doesn't, and is nice and loud. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you need to get more experience. You don't. You have songwriting skills. You have arrangement skills. This track is very, again, I don't know the genre, but you seem to. You said here that you'll be releasing the song with a distributor. So that's all that matters, Andrew, is the arrangement and the songwriting. That's what really counts. Forget about loudness, because pretty soon everything is going to be normalized. Everything's going to be playing back at the same volume. And, the radio station doesn't own the volume knob. YouTube doesn't own the volume knob. You do. You can just turn it up right there. Everyone has a knob. There's another joke for you. So getting it up, and everybody has a knob. You can turn it up on your phone. You can turn it up on your desk or whatever like that. Don't worry about loudness so much, because you're fighting a losing battle. And also, any victory you have, I think, is a Pyrrhic victory, meaning that you go into battle with a bunch of troops and you win the battle, but you lose a whole bunch of troops, but you won the battle. It's the same thing with this. If you try to get your mix really loud and you really push the limiter, well, yeah, congratulations, it sounds as loud as Work by Rihanna, but everything is crushed. All the dynamics are gone, and people like dynamic music. People like really dynamic stuff. James Blake's new record. I don't know if you guys know Ian Shepherd. He's a mastering engineer who I'm actually hoping to talk to on the next podcast. He has a lot to say about dynamics, and Andrew and James Blake's new record was just released not too long ago, and it's a very dynamic record. It's a very quiet record, but when you turn it up, it sounds amazing, especially for glitch hop and stuff. I mean, this is music for the senses. This is body music, right? That stuff has to hit you, and it's really hard for things to hit you and poke out when everything is at the same place. And I put it through iZotope's Insight, and I think you're registering at your loudest moments of integrated loudness at like minus 5.5 LUFS. That's really loud, man. That's really loud. And I'm not using any compressors or limiters or anything. I'm just putting it right into the system, and it's reading out that the max level you have is like minus 5.5. I think, Drake's Hotline Bling was like -6, -7, so it's yours is louder than that, so you might run into some trouble down the road, but again, the songwriting is there, the arrangement is there. Don't worry about getting it so darn loud. As far as general tips for mixing and stuff, one thing I noticed, and this might help your tracker a little bit, is that everything is super wide in the stereo image, and you want to be careful because a lot of playback formats, I mean, especially if you're going to bring this to a club, it's mono, right? So, and I actually checked the phase. I actually we went to mono here, and I actually did some phase inversion stuff, and you might have some stuff that's out of phase because the mix sort of collapses into itself when you go mono. And the phone I'm using to record this vodcast on, it's a mono output system. So are iPads, but especially for the club, if this is glitch hop, and if it isn't glitch hop, then I'm sorry I keep saying that it is. Those are mono output systems. So reference this mix in mono, and I think it sounds very, very different, man. I think you might have to go back and sort of rework a couple things to make sure that they still poke out, because when I put it in mono, the mix just sort of, it folds in, and we might have some phase issues, but it definitely gets less interesting. And all is not lost. One thing you could do is go back into your mix and take those choruses and pan them nice and wide, and then take the other moments and pan them nice and narrow so that we get a little bit of contrast between the verse and the chorus. Just do this with automation. Just pan it wide, super left and right, and then super 12 o'clock when you hit the verses, and that might sort of save you a bit. But take whatever you're using that is, take whatever you have panned really, 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 really wide through the whole track, if it's your horns or if it's the piano, and just don't make it hard left and right. Just bring it in a little bit. Maybe, if we're using the clock metaphor, maybe, 10 o'clock and 2, and that's as wide as you want to go. Make it nice and super wide for the chorus, but just bring it back there, because everything is sort of spread out, and we get a nice sort of bright wide mix. But if it's like that the entire way, and if it's as loud as it is the entire way, it might be sort of overload on the listener and overload on the senses, and maybe that might be what's contributing to that sort of shrill effect that you have there. So things like, for just some rules of thumb, okay? Kick drums, mono, okay? They should be right at 12 o'clock. Cymbals and stuff, those should be pretty wide. A piano, that's up to you. You can go wide with that, or you can go sort of narrow. Doesn't really matter. Bass should be mono, okay? All the time. If you're panning bass right and left, it's going to disappear when you get it onto a club system. It's just going to sound thin. And make sure you check your phase and stuff like that. Guitars, those can be pretty wide. You don't have any guitars in here, I don't think. As far as a synth lead goes, that's up to you, man. I mean, I would suggest not compressing them too much, especially if you're going to be doubling them and adding cool effects like that, and pan them maybe, again, conservatively, the 10 and 2 o'clock if you're going to be panning those. But bass and kick, mono, no questions. That's not one of those like, you're wrong on YouTube comments. No, that's just the way it is. So pan those nice and in the middle, and just do some overall panning, I think, in the verse and chorus, wide and narrow, and I think you might get back some of that sort of grit and depth, because this is a super cool song. I like the dance hall rhythm that leads into the track. It's like dum ba dum ba psh, and that fun water sound effect at the end there that really sort of gets the title underwater. Really good stuff. So just go back and maybe tweak some things, or just ignore all this advice. It doesn't really matter. But thanks for sending it in, and hopefully you sat through that and your brain hasn't exploded and you learned something. Okay, moving right along. Okay, the next one comes to me from Tanvir Kohli. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Thanks for sending this in. He sent a mix in, and he said, here are my questions for this mix. So number one, what do you think of the arrangement? When layering sounds and instrument parts through different sectors, do you automate volume, EQ, blah, 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 to make room for new sound, ? 2, gain staging. I guess with DAW workflows, we mix as we go. That's true. However, once you're done laying everything down, do you have a specific approach to gain staging? For example, let's say you want the kick and the vocal to be the loudest elements in the mix, so do you let them sit around minus 6 dB and mix everything around it? Lastly, he says some producer friends of mine recommended having ozone mastering chain on the master bus when programming. Of course, there are no rules, but what do you think of this approach? So, okay, let's have a listen to the song, and then I'll address those questions and do a little bit of a mixed review for you, Tanvir. And thanks for being so patient, by the way. Here we go. Okay, thank you so much for sending that in, Tanvir. Hopefully I'm saying your name properly. Now, number one, what do I think of the arrangement? I think it's a very good arrangement. I think that there's a nice sort of build up and lead in, and then we have a climax. So I think the arrangement is very solid. It's a very sort of standard arrangement, right? You have like a bit of a build up and then a bridge and then a boom. The chorus kind of comes in. I can imagine it being, this being in a commercial or something. I think you said it might be destined for a commercial. Yeah, TVC for a fashion company. I think is television commercials that what TVC is? I don't know. But this sounds like something, like a kind of, I hope I'm not insulting you, like Project Runway, that sort of thing. Very flashy, very sort of glossy. And anyway, so I think the arrangement is solid. It's very clear where things are landing. And believe it or not, a lot of people have a hard time with arrangement. A lot of people sort of overblow it, or they make a verse too long or a chorus too long. And this is, in 1 minute, I know exactly what's happening in this track. It's very clear, very sober, makes a lot of sense. So your next question is about when layering sounds and instrument parts through different sections, do you automate volume EQ to make room for new sound? Yeah, definitely. So for example, the kick and the bass, you want to look at where those are, pull up a parametric EQ, visual EQ, look at where the kick and the bass are. If you see that the bass and the kick are competing, which they almost always are, you want to scoop out room so that they're playing together. It's like a seesaw metaphor, right? If two people are sitting on the seesaw, it's not going to go anywhere. So one has to be on top, and then it has to go back and forth and teeter and totter. So yeah, and if I have, if I'm doing, I seldom do EQ automation. I just sort of, I look at where things are on the spectrum and then EQ it and set it and forget it. Sometimes I'll do EQ automation, like the clariphonic, which is the Kush clariphonic, which I reviewed way back when I had less hair on my face and on my head. And that is basically, parallel EQing. That's what that thing does. So sometimes I'll automate that. So that's a kind of EQ automation. But you want to basically scoop out space for instruments. Imagine a photograph metaphor, right, Tanvir? Like if you get a big group of people together and everyone's sort of standing up nice and straight, you try and take the picture, someone might be blocking somebody else. So you want to say, okay, you go down a couple inches, you come up a couple inches, you get down on your knee, and maybe we'll have the tall people in the back. You want to do the same thing with EQing. And I think you've done a really good job of that here, because everything is kind of coming together and everything sort of makes sense. And I can hear all the different parts and stuff. Especially the bass and the kick, very loud, very punchy, loud in a good way. I'm not hearing any distortion, at least on my my monitoring system here. So those things are very clear and very defined, and are that piano like ding, 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 ding. That was still kind of audible. When the kick and the snare came in. The only thing that I didn't like was the use of side chaining on that. Like it goes I feel like it's just not necessary for this song, and my brain would prefer it if you just took the side chain compression off. I don't know if you're using a ghost kick or something to compress and that's pumping in and out, but I just say ditch it, man. If you want to do something interesting and you still want some sort of movement there, just go with some little bit of gain automation or something. Because I think it just isn't needed, but that's just like, take it or leave it. Who cares, right? The next question is gain staging, which is so important. And you asked about this. So what's my approach to gain staging? So basically, I mean, a lot of people use a lot of effects and stuff now. I'm getting away from those, which is really hilarious since I spent so much money on effects plugins and stuff. And now I just use a lot of native stuff and compress and EQ to taste. But gain staging, for anyone who doesn't know, is just making sure that if you have multiple effects on top of an instrument that's going into another compressor, it's being sidechained by another compressor that's feeding into a master compressor. Like, you want to make sure that at every step, every stage of that chain, you aren't pushing anything too hot. So if you're throwing, let's say, a drum track in, and you have an insert, which means that you've placed, let's say, Sound Toys' Decapitator. You've placed that on top of that drum track. You want to make sure that you're not pushing that too hard, because you also have that kick drum going into an auxiliary, a return that has another compressor on it. So if it's too hard on that drum track, if the decapitator is too hard, and then that signal is being sent to another compressor, it's going to be going hot into the compressor, which means you're probably going to get some distortion or something. So you want to make sure that you're conservatively staging all of your steps, all of your gain, all your meters, right? You want to make sure that nothing is going into the red, and there are great indicators, I think, on every plugin now. For a Waves plugin, for example, you have meters. You have green, yellow, and red. You want to make sure that you're probably just leaving green and going into yellow, and then leave that there. And then you want to make sure on the actual instrument track, in the example before it was a drum, you want to make sure that you're not too hot on that basic drum track, because you're feeding the drum into the decapitator, and then you're going out of the decapitator and the instrument track into another thing. There's all kinds of processing going around, and if you're hot leaving those instruments, you're going to be hot going into your returns and stuff. So then everything's going to sound really muddy and messy. I didn't hear really any of that in this mix, but basically just go and Google a tutorial on gain staging. It's something that a lot of people don't know about, and a lot of people go, I turn on this EQ and then I compress it and it just sounds like garbage, and I thought it was going to sound great. Well, chances are, start at the source. Start with that drum. Is it too loud? Turn it down a little bit, and then add it into the effect, and then bring out the output of that effect a little bit. And look at your meter. Is it yellow? Then you're okay. If it's red, back it off. And then if you're sending it into another compressor, just really sort of be careful with that send. Make it hot, go all the way up, and then bring it down to a place where it's not distorting anymore, and then just sort of set it there. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about in Hum Music's question about how to properly mix guitars and add sort of weight and stuff like that. The same advice that I gave him about making sure that you don't have too much gain, which everyone seems to add at the source. When your session player is playing whatever, that's gain staging, because you want to make sure there's a little bit of gain, and then it's going into whatever level you have, and set that at the proper level. Look at your meters, use your ears to make sure it's not distorting, and then you can apply effects after that, and you won't lose the character of that sound because things aren't distorting and you've properly gain staged it. So that question was just a perfect lead up to this one, which is just gain staging is super important, and it's overlooked, and don't overlook it. Thanks for bringing it up, Tanveer. Let's get to the other things you're talking about here, which is, let's say you have the kick and the vocal. You want those to be the loudest elements in the mix, so you, let's say you leave them around -6 dB and have everything else around it. This is tough because these are all sort of questions of taste, and it's very subjective. I don't know. Some people do that. Like, some people will leave those and basically have everything else built around them. Typically, that's the way it is, especially in pop music. We build everything around the drums and the vocal, primarily the vocal, if I'm being honest. But it's not always the case. That's a rule, but rules are meant to be, you just learn them and you forget them. So one thing I'll say is, kind of another rule of thumb is to make sure that nothing in the mix is louder than the master fader. So look at your master fader. If the meter is at, -8 dB, then make sure that nothing else in that mix is above -8 dB. If the vocal is hitting -8 dB, you're going to maybe run into some problems. So this is sort of macro gain staging. So maybe make sure that you're at -11 dB or -10 dB. So make sure that you take the loudest thing that you have and just drag that insert all the way over to the master, and if it's louder than the master, turn it down, and then go back to the drawing board and turn everything else down. But what you're talking about is a good way. You're saying, should you leave the kick and the vocal loudness? That's a good way to sort of prioritize. You're doing a hierarchy, right, of importance with your gain staging. So yeah, you could do that. You could leave it there. You could also do a little bit of gain automation here and there on the chorus. It might dip to like -5. It's not the end of the world, but bring it back to -6 and all kinds of stuff like that. But you want to look at your integrated overall loudness, and you can do that with RX Insight. So look at what the loud moments are versus the quiet moments. And yeah, you want to employ proper gain staging rules, and hopefully I explain that in a way that's intelligible. And the last bit here, you said some producer friends of mine are recommend having ozone mastering chain on the master bus. What do I think of that approach? I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people do that. Go ahead and do it. Whatever works for you, man. You don't need ozone to master. A lot of people think you do, but if you look at ozone, take it up piece by piece. What's an ozone? A maximizer? That's a limiter. And Ableton has one of those built in. So does Logic. You got EQs. Every other DAW has those. You have a compressor, multiband compressor. A lot of DAWs have multiband compressors, and you can even make your own. Just add a whole bunch of compressors in a row, and then narrow them down. Add an EQ and narrow them down. Split it up into 5 bands if you want, and then send your whole mix into that. And there, you just made a multiband compressor. You can do that in Ableton. You can do that in Pro Tools. So a lot of these guys, iZotope is amazing, don't get me wrong, and the amount of research and development that goes into their products is tremendous. But don't be afraid to use some of the native stuff that you have if you don't have the money for iZotope, or if you don't have the money for T-Rax or any other products out there to do your mastering, because a lot of those things can be achieved on your own. Now, the one benefit that iZotope has is that gear is geared toward mastering. So a lot of stuff that you're using, maybe a native Ableton EQ or something like that, that's geared maybe toward the mixing stage, or maybe just EQing one instrument, whereas Ozone's limiter, which has really intelligent IRCs, I think it's IRCs, is it? Yeah, so they've got really intelligent release control sort of algorithms, which is going to make the peaks pump and pop in ways that are different from one another. They have like 4 different algorithms, a brand new one in iZotope. What are we at now for Ozone? Yeah, for Ozone 7. So there's all kinds of stuff. But basically, you can get, I think, pretty good to a pretty good place just using the native stuff that's in your DAW. You don't have to go to iZotope, to Ozone. But if you want to, it's there, and there's a lot of other great options for you too. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to gain stage and how to work this mix, and I think it sounds great. I think it's ready for the market. And yeah, okay. So I have a question here from Twitter, and it's from Henry Music, and he asked me at the at Twitter. It's at Jeff Manch. He didn't use the Vodkast hashtag. It's all good. He says, "What do you think about speaker correction programs like Sonar Works?" So what is he talking about? Sonar puts out this product where basically it'll measure the frequency response of your room, and then it'll apply an EQ curve to your speakers. So that you're not getting any resonant peaks or anything like that the room is causing to the frequency spectrum. So you can hear things in sort of a flat, equal energy at all octaves of the frequency spectrum sort of way. What do I think about this? If you're in a crappy room and you don't have any money to deaden it or dampen it or buy diffusers or build diffusers or whatever it is, then these tools are really important. I think if you're going to buy anything, like if you're going to spend like $300, which is what I think it costs, or maybe something cheaper, I don't know, on a crazy night of sushi and drinking, like spend it on speaker correction instead. It's like an investment, you know what I mean? You're going to have that forever, and that's all good. If you can't afford to spend the time and get some friends and build some stuff to sort of deaden and dampen the room, then yeah, these options are really great. But I would also say that you could spend money on this thing, or you could just learn as much as you can about acoustics and try to deaden the room at the source. It's always about the source. You're always going back to the source. If you're having problems, you're having resonant peaks, and all that means is, let's say this shoots out a sound and it's bouncing off a wall and meeting the wall again. You're getting a standing wave, right? And it just bounces back and forth. That's what waves do, and it builds up and it gets loud. So you'll be playing notes on a keyboard like A, B, C, D, E, and that's because E is hitting a wall, coming back in, and then doubling and getting louder. So that's a resonant peak, a resonant frequency. And that might mess up your setup here if you're trying to listen back and monitor properly. It might mess it up. I know that not everybody has a perfect room. I know that not everyone has the knowledge, I think, to learn about acoustics and psychoacoustics and all that stuff. But the resources out there are amazing. I mean, I went to school, but if you want to learn about acoustics, you don't have to go to school. There's so many great tutorials. There's so many great websites that'll teach you about this stuff. And instead of spending $300 on whatever SonarWorks has to offer, which I'm sure is terrific, don't get me wrong, I haven't used it. I think I've known maybe a few people that have. Just spend that $300, learning how to treat your room, and learning how to build panels, acoustic panels, learning how to diffuse sound waves and stuff like that with diffusers. And you don't have to break the bank. You can just buy some rock wool, leave it in the corner, get some friends to come by, build some panels. That's what I did. And just make sure you don't place your monitoring system near the closest wall to you, because sound likes to travel, right? And if it doesn't have far to go, it'll bounce back really quickly. And if you don't have something to dampen it or diffuse it, send it off into another direction, it's going to meet that wall and then bounce back, and you're going to get those peaks. So just get creative with your space, man. Nothing against speaker correction. I think speaker correction is great. It's great that we have all this technology and stuff. But one of the things I find about this kind of audio industry is, and this happens when I get sent music or sent dialogue to mix or something, is there's this perception that, we don't need to record it properly because it can be fixed. Jeff can just use RX and fix the sound of that car going by. When really what they should have done was just had their boom mic, I'm using a film, scene metaphor, and just waited for the car to pass and then record the audio, or just go tell that guy to shut up and not talk so we don't have it on the audio track. There's this perception that we can sort of fix everything in post. And that's, I think, what programs like SonarWorks, they're trying to do is, instead of learning how to treat your room and then solving these problems forever, we have an antidote for that. We can fix that if you send us $300 and whatever. And again, nothing against these guys, but try to always go back to the source and fix the source. Fix the problem at the sort of entry point, and then you'll have fewer things to deal with. You'll have a quieter noise floor, all the rest of it. And I understand that not everyone's in a perfect room or a perfect space or whatever, but there are things you can do. Maybe what I'll do is I'll leave some links in the description to resources you can go to learn this stuff. It's very cheap. I mean, big pack of rock wool, go to a fabric store, buy some cheap fabric, buy a staple gun. It's not that expensive. Get those together. I mean, look at your first reflection points. All that means is, the first point at which the sound wave leaves the speaker and hits the wall, that's the first reflection. A lot of people do this thing called a mirror trick. It's simple. Just take a mirror and then go back, and when you can see the speaker in the mirror, that's the reflection point. That's where you want to put your first panel, your first acoustic panel. That's where the sound is going to be hitting first. You absorb it, you catch it right there in the spot, done. It's not going to travel anymore. Or you can disperse it with a diffuser, and you can learn about those. You can build those. So people like Steve Duda, I mean, I'm sure you've seen, hopefully I said that right. Look at any of his videos. He's got bass traps. Really easy to build bass traps. I'm sure he just built them all himself. He didn't hire an acoustician or a mastering engineer to come in and treat his room. A case of beer and a couple friends, you can get a lot done. So that's my sort of tip. If you're in dire straits, you don't have a choice, go for something like this, but go back to the source. Try and fix things at the source. I think that concludes this episode of the Vodkast. If you want me to review your mix or talk about it or talk about questions, even questions about composing or whatever, just write me at vodkastpodcaster@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter @JeffManch, #Vodkast. We'll be good to go. One more thing is that I think I'm trying to get this mastering engineer for the next one. So if you guys have mastering questions, I know there's a guy named Alex M who wrote me about mid-side techniques and all that. Write those into me, and maybe if I get Ian Shepard, he will answer some of those questions so that we'll get like a real mastering guy to answer them. I master stuff too, but I mean, he knows way more than I do, so we can actually get him to talk about your questions, and that would be awesome, right? Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you had a good time, and I just posted a new tutorial on composing a cue for a trailer, so check that out if you have a minute. And yeah, take it easy. Bye.